Standing by the hospital bed, I watched as my wife, Kristen, cradled the newborn in her arms. Her face glowed with a potent mix of exhaustion and elation, fueled by the adrenaline rush of childbirth. She wore a soft, relieved smile, fragile yet proud, while the baby squirmed in a pale pink blanket. Across from her stood her mother, Dolores, a tall, hawk-eyed woman with a fierce demeanor. On Kristen's other side was my mother, Linda, shorter in stature and equally tense, her gaze flickering from Kristen to me more times than I could count. Though we were all together in that bright, sterile room, we might as well have been planets orbiting separate suns. I could feel my mother's steady gaze on my back, could sense Dolores's suspicion, and I had this sense that Kristen herself was trying to telegraph an unspoken plea. Please, just sign the paperwork. A nurse in pastel scrubs slipped in, carrying the standard hospital clipboard, her expression professionally neutral. Mr. Davis, she addressed me with mechanical politeness, I need you to fill out the birth certificate form. Right then, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, because I didn't immediately reach out for the pen. Instead, I leaned slightly away from the bed, crossing my arms over my chest as I spoke. I'd rather wait, I said briskly. We'll fill it out after the DNA test. Prove something. Kristen's head snapped upward as though an invisible string yanked it. What? She nearly hissed the word, face twisting with shock. Her eyes were huge in the fluorescent lighting. Martin, are you out of your mind? The baby's right here, in my arms. Why would you talk about a DNA test on the day she's born? I shrugged, feigning casualness. Because, I answered, I have reason to suspect matters might not be as they seem. I offered a simple, cold stare, one I'd perfected over the sleepless nights in which my suspicions had grown. If this little girl isn't mine, I will not be signing anything. Dolores sucked in a sharp breath and shot forward, eyes flashing with immediate rage. How dare you? She brandished an accusatory finger at me, forcing her voice low to avoid upsetting the baby, yet it came out with a snarl. My daughter just gave birth. Are you seriously doing this to her right now? My mother, Linda, rushed to place a calming hand on Dolores's arm, but Dolores shrugged it off violently. Don't you try to hush me, Dolores growled, turning that fierce expression to Linda. You know damn well your son is out of line. That is not how you treat a woman who's just gone through labor. My mother tried again, stepping carefully between Dolores and me. Her own eyes were steeled with anger, but tempered with something like heartbreak. Martin, she said in a commanding whisper, please, let's not do this here. Not in front of Kristen, not in front of the baby. I half laughed and lifted a dismissive hand. She's known my stance on this for months, I lied. Though in partial truth, Kristen had at least suspected my doubts. And I'm sorry if it's inconvenient timing for you all. But I need absolute certainty that I'm the father before I bind myself legally to a child. The nurse glanced around nervously, then muttered, I'll come back later, before gently backing out of the room, leaving the birth certificate paperwork neatly on a small rolling table. Kristen's face twisted from shock into a slow simmering, desperate anger. You sick bastard, she said, tears threatening. You're punishing me for no reason. You really think I cheated on you? Not just think, I replied, my tone clipped. I know. I was ready for an explosion. But Dolores made the first move, so enraged that she nearly put a hand on me. Don't you speak to her like that. Don't you ever accuse my daughter of such a disgusting act. Mom, please, Kristen interjected, hugging the baby close. He's lost his mind. He's always at work. He has some stupid idea that I cheated. Because you did, I interrupted, my voice carrying a certain deadly calm. I examined my wife's face. She paused, blinking as though I'd slapped her. Linda tried to step in again, pleading in her tone. Martin, please say you're joking. Don't do this. The baby is right there. This moment is precious. You can't tear it apart. Everyone's going to remember this day for the rest of their lives. But Dolores's voice shattered everything. He's being a piece of garbage, Linda. How could you let your son get away with this kind of nonsense? Linda's face near crumpled, but she turned to me with an edge in her tone. Son, I know you're upset about certain suspicions, but can't you see how wrong it is to be doing this here? At least do it later. At that moment, as though a curtain dropped, I let out the piece of information I'd been holding. I put a camera in her car. My tone was rough, unremorseful. Our dash cam. Then I installed spyware. I recorded everything you said. Kristen. Kristen's face lost every hint of color. Dolores stared at her daughter, then at me, stunned into silence. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out my phone. Tension clutched the room as I pressed a few buttons. Listen here, I said, my voice feeling disconnected from my body, but I wanted them to hear the words. This is from 3 weeks ago, in her car. I tapped a file, letting the audio ring out. It crackled a little at first, but then Kristen's voice came through, hissed and disdainful. This loser is always at work. He won't notice a damn thing. I'm going to make him sign the certificate, and when I divorce him, he'll pay for custody. But when the baby grows up, I'll tell her the truth anyway. Her voice continued in that same acidic sneer, describing in detail how I was no more than a convenient wallet. Kristen nearly dropped the baby, so shocked that the child whined in protest. Dolores gasped audibly, bringing both hands to her mouth. Linda looked torn between horror and heartbreak. Then, without warning, Dolores lashed out at me. She yanked the phone out of my hand and in one swift movement hurled it down. The device clattered to the hospital floor. "You vile snake!" she shrieked, "spying on my daughter!" Only then did Linda physically interpose herself, bracing her arms wide, trying to separate us. "Stop! Everybody calm down!" But Dolores turned her rage fully on her daughter. "Did you really say those things, Kristen?" she demanded. "What in the world? That's monstrous! That's manipulative, vile!" Kristen was trembling, tears leaking from her eyes, her voice rising in panic. "Mom, it's not like that! Shut up!" Dolores' snarling voice carried enough venom to paralyze the entire room. "I defended you! I nearly physically attacked Martin just now, only to find out you confessed on tape that you were planning to pin a child on him for money." I took the moment to respond, my voice filled with quiet bitterness. "She's been sleeping with that man, Marshall Jones, for months. Maybe it's longer. She told me it ended, but, well, you heard her. She didn't have the decency to keep it hidden from her own mouth." Linda exhaled hard, pressing trembling fingers to her lips. "Oh, God," she whispered, looking at Kristen. "Kristen, tell me that was some twisted joke. Please." Kristen only sobbed, clutching the baby, who had begun to fuss. Dolores turned toward me, her eyes blazing. "All right, so you have a recording. But so what, Martin? You came in here like the devil himself, brandishing your audio proof, humiliating my daughter right after she's given birth." "Yes," I said simply, "because I'm the baby's father, or I'm not. And I'm not signing until I know for sure." Dolores' frustration with me hadn't abated, though her shock at Kristen's words was obvious. She advanced, jabbing a finger in my face. "Sign it!" she demanded hotly. "Sign that certificate now! Don't you dare abandon my granddaughter!" I shook my head, stepping back, ignoring the swirl of guilt that threatened any normal father in such a moment. "I'm not abandoning a child who isn't mine," I spat. "If the results come back that she's mine, then all right, otherwise, no." Seething, Dolores lunged forward, as if about to rip the pen off the table and stuff it into my hand. Linda cried out, grabbing Dolores before the woman could make an outright scene. Dolores was beyond rational. "Sign it, you bastard!" she almost shrieked, tears of fury in her eyes, her voice echoing off the hospital walls. "You do it or I swear—" "Enough!" The door slammed open, and 2 nurses stood there, eyes wide with alarm. One of them stepped inside, voice trembling with schoolteacher authority. "Stop yelling! This is a hospital!" Dolores whirled around, took one look, and realized the scene she was causing. Realizing the precarious place we all stood, she let out a snarling exhale. She backed off, tears carving watery paths down her cheeks, but her rage was not extinguished. It merely simmered. In the bed, Kristen was weeping uncontrollably, holding the baby as if the child were the only buoy in a storm-torn sea. I caught her glancing at me in a combination of anger and desperation, but I merely stared back, unmoved. If she had harbored any illusions about me caving, the audio recording had ended those fantasies. Linda finally found her voice. "All of you," she said, swallowing hard. "Let's get out of this room." "Wait," I said, my words crisp. While the nurse hovered uncertainly, I narrowed my gaze at Kristen. "You told Marshall I'd pay child support, right?" I snapped, referencing the tape. "Well, guess you'll need to find him for that." She stared at me, tears brimming. Then in a raw, shaking voice, she spat out, Why are you doing this? You are cruel. You're torturing a new mother. Cruel? I repeated softly. Sure, but I learned from you, darling. Dolores made another move toward me, but Linda caught her elbow, physically ushering her toward the door. The second nurse began to speak quietly, instructing Kristen about postpartum care, while also giving me a glare that spoke volumes about her disapproval. I turned, stepping out. My mother followed, as always, torn. Even in the hallway, Dolores's accusations never stopped. She hissed words I won't forget. You worthless scum, Martin Davis. I'll kill you if you abandon that baby. I don't care what the test says. I locked eyes with her. Try me, I said. That child isn't mine if science says otherwise. Later that evening, I sat at home with a single lamp illuminating the living room. The tension of earlier events still weighed heavily on me, but I was not about to cave to anyone's demands. Certainly not Kristen's manipulative ones. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring twice before picking up. She greeted me in a quiet voice. Son, I sighed. Mom, I'm with Dolores and Kristen now, she said softly. The baby's asleep, and Kristen, she's inconsolable. Dolores is frightened for her mental health. She's just given birth, Martin. I snorted. You think I care after hearing that tape? She was perfectly fine manipulating me into signing a certificate so she could bleed me dry once she divorced me. A pause. I heard my mother's shaky sigh. I know what you heard, but Martin, postpartum is no joke. You need to consider that. A woman's hormones are all over the place. Don't, I said, letting anger seep into my voice. Don't try to make me the villain for finally defending myself after she lied and cheated. I gave her no trouble during her pregnancy because I wanted the baby born healthy. If the baby's mine, I'll support her. But if it's not, this charade is over. Another silence. What do I tell them then? She asked, almost pleading. Tell them to expect the divorce papers soon, I answered firmly. I'm sure Kristen's mother will be thrilled to take her back. I'm done. An awkward, heavy silence hung between us, and then she hung up, leaving me alone in the dim quiet. Over the next week, storms of accusations and pleas raged. Dolores tried showing up at my house twice. My mother phoned me daily, sometimes in tears, sometimes furious, but I ignored them all. I had a good lawyer, and he filed the papers quickly under grounds of adultery. Meanwhile, Kristen was still in the hospital for postpartum checkups. The child was small, healthy, they said, but needing standard newborn monitoring. Perfect time for a paternity test. My lawyer and I made sure the judges would see we had done everything correctly. The big day arrived. The DNA results. I cut open the envelope, my breath shallow, even though, logically, I already knew. The test read, probability of paternity equals 0%. There it was on official stationery with lines of genetic markers. The child was not mine. Did I feel a wave of relief? Not exactly. More of a cold emptiness, confirmation. Everything I'd suspected was hammered into place. I scanned the rest of the paperwork, ensuring no mistakes. But it was there in black and white. I stepped into my car, started it up, and drove the short distance to Dolores's house. She had insisted on bringing Kristen and the baby there after discharge, and part of me, twisted as it was, wanted to see the look on Dolores's face when I told her the final truth. The front door opened before I even knocked. Dolores, pale, tired, but as defiant as ever, met me on the porch. You have some nerve stepping onto my property, she said in a near growl, refusing to let me pass. I let a beat of silence pass. The child isn't mine, I told her, brandishing the paper. So you can stop screaming at me to sign anything. A flicker of something, maybe heartbreak, crossed her eyes. You're lying. I exhaled sharply, shoving the page forward. Read it. She snatched the paper. The lines of text must have shouted at her because her expression turned stony. I watched her shoulders slump in pure despair. Slowly, she stepped back, letting me inside. Kristen, she called. Come here, now. The baby was not in sight, presumably sleeping elsewhere, but Kristen appeared in the dimly lit hallway, wearing the same exhausted expression I'd last seen on her at the hospital. Only now, tinted with misery. Tears clung to her eyelashes. What? She asked dully, obviously expecting more confrontation. Dolores extended the paper, and Kristen took it. When her eyes scanned the lines that spelled out our genetic mismatch, her breathing caught. I saw her sway on her feet, but she grabbed the doorway to steady herself. Then she looked at me. trembling, sorrow filling her expression. "It's not possible," she whispered. "They must have made a mistake." "No," I said softly, but with an edge of finality. "No mistake. You and Marshall made a baby. That's who the father is." Kristen pressed her lips together, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. "Martin, I swear I love you," she pleaded. I didn't want all this." "You said some pretty explicit things in that recording," I reminded her. "Things a person who loves me wouldn't dare say." She broke down sobbing, but Dolores whirled on me. "So what now, Martin?" she demanded, defiant despite her sorrow. "Now that you have your proof, you'll just abandon her and the baby?" I felt my jaw clench. "Yes," I said, unwavering. "Exactly. I want a divorce, and I want no part of raising this child." Dolores's anger spiked, but there was also desperation in her eyes. "She needs you," she almost screamed. You can't just vanish. This is a baby, you heartless—" "Heartless?" I snapped, letting a slight sneer creep into my voice. "After what your daughter did, after she planned on making me pay child support for 18 years for a child that's not mine?" I shook my head, feeling something dark coil in my stomach. "I might be cruel, but your daughter taught me everything I know about cruelty." Kristen's voice emerged, small and trembling. "Please, Martin." She reached for me, but I stepped back, ignoring the broken sob that followed. I turned away toward the door. Then, for a fraction of a second, guilt threatened to paralyze me. Yes, the baby was absolutely innocent, but so was I, in the sense that I hadn't fathered her. "It's done," I said finally. "Don't contact me." And I walked out. During the divorce proceedings, the judge glowered at me from behind her glasses as if I were the worst man on earth. "Mr. Davis," she said, "your wife has indicated she wishes to reconcile." Across the aisle, Kristen sat with tears in her eyes, wringing her hands. Dolores hovered protectively, while my mother sat to the side, eyes fixed on the courtroom carpet. I faced the judge. "There's nothing to reconcile," I stated flatly. "We have proof of adultery, a child that is not mine. As far as I'm concerned, this marriage is over." Kristen tried to speak, voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I messed up, but I love him." I felt a cynical smirk tug at my lips. "She's sorry she got caught," I said, "and she loves the convenience I offered, not me." Her lawyer tried to object. "Your Honor, Mr. Davis is misrepresenting," but my own attorney, a slick man named Ray Ellis, quickly interjected. "Your Honor, this is a case of clear-cut paternity fraud. My client should not be held financially or emotionally responsible for a child that he did not father." The judge frowned. "What about spousal support?" she asked, flipping through the file. "Mrs. Davis currently has no job and no means of providing for herself or her child." I wanted to laugh. "She can get a job," I said, "and the child's father should man up if he's even around." At that, Kristen let out a heart-wrenching sob. He abandoned me. Marshall is gone." The judge's gaze settled on me. "Be that as it may, sir, you have been married for 3 years. Standard procedure might require some spousal support." My lawyer cleared his throat, imposing a polite but firm tone. "Your Honor, we're seeking an at-fault divorce. Mrs. Davis's actions led to the irretrievable breakdown of this marriage. Even spousal support can be contested under these grounds." The judge shook her head, clearly displeased. She hammered her gavel lightly. "We'll break for lunch. Court is adjourned until then. We'll reconvene afterward." Outside in the hallway, I ended up near a bench. Kristen approached me, tears still in her eyes. She put a hand on my arm. I pulled away. She tried to speak in a hushed tone. "We can fix this." "No," I said, a single word that bristled with finality. Dolores joined us, narrowing her eyes. "Stop it, Martin. For God's sake, she's postpartum, depressed, suicidal. She's told me she wants to end it all. You're pushing her to the edge." I stared at Dolores, feeling a flicker of discomfort, but I hardened my expression. "She pushed herself," I replied. "If she's suicidal, I suggest she get professional help. I'm done being her emotional punching bag." Dolores hissed, "You are a monster." I turned away, letting the label roll off me. Somewhere behind me, I heard my mother's soft, trembling exhale. But I didn't look back. When the divorce was finalized, it came as no shock. The judge grudgingly declared the marriage dissolved. No children to settle custody over. Kristen pivoted to live with Dolores full-time, carrying the weight of the heartbreak she'd co-authored. I thought that was my last time dealing with them. I was wrong. Months passed. I sold my house and moved to a different neighborhood, trying to sever every possible tie. I had no illusions that my mother would remain close friends with Dolores. After all, they had been childhood companions. But I tried to keep my distance from all of them. Then one day, about 3 years later, I got a call from Dolores. I nearly let it go to voicemail, but an odd sense of foreboding made me answer. "What?" I asked, annoyance coloring my voice. "I need you at my place," she said, firmly ignoring my hostility. "Why would I ever—" "It's not about Kristen," Dolores said. "Just come. Your mother's here, too. That's all I'll say." Against all better judgment, I found myself driving to Dolores's house. Old resentments churned in my stomach. I rubbed at my temples, trying to quell the headache of stepping right back into that drama. When I arrived, I saw my mother's car in the driveway. I sighed, bracing myself, and walked up to the door. Inside, the living room was dimly lit. Dolores stood near the window, and my mother, Linda, sat on a small couch, arms folded. Then a small boy peeked out from behind the couch. Maybe 3, maybe approaching 4. He looked at me curiously with big, inquisitive eyes. He stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" In a child's direct manner. I blinked. The boy had scruffy brown hair, a bit curly at the ends. He was no older than 3.5. I felt a chill as I spoke. "I'm Martin." The boy nodded sagely, as though I'd said my name was Santa Claus. "I'm Tim," he said, then ran off. Dolores's lips parted into something akin to a fond smile. "Timothy, he's a good kid." I couldn't help but ask, "Is that—" "Kristen's child," Dolores supplied. "Yes." A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. I never wanted to see that child. She had given birth to a girl, hadn't she? I realized maybe I never got the full story. Perhaps there had been a second pregnancy, but I said nothing, waiting. My mother exhaled. "Martin," she said softly, "please come sit." I remained standing. "Why have you called me here? Did you just want to show off your grandchild?" I asked bitterly. Dolores's face was drawn, more solemn than I'd ever seen. "Kristen is no longer with us," she said, her voice quiet. I felt something cold in my stomach. "As in, she died?" Dolores nodded. "It was an accident in Florida, with an alligator." Her words were halting, strangely emphasized. My mother, Linda, rose from the couch, taking a step toward me. "She's gone, Martin. That's final." I stood there, not sure how to process what I felt. Relief, shock, emptiness, some swirl of conflicting emotions that left me speechless. But then Dolores cast her gaze at me, unwavering. "She was spiraling," she said. "And I won't lie to you, Martin, it wasn't an accident." My eyes snapped up in alarm. "What are you saying?" Dolores kept her tone carefully neutral. "I ended it. I'd bring her near the water. She thought we were tourists seeing the wildlife. I gave her a push, left her to the gators." A tiny grim smile flickered on her lips. She had become too great a burden, poisoning Tim's mind, resurfacing hatred toward you. It was time to ensure she wouldn't ruin this boy. My mother's voice was disturbingly calm as she stepped forward. "I was there too." My jaw nearly dropped. "Mom, are you insane?" She shook her head. "We protected the child, Martin. That's what matters." Her face was stony, revealing no regret. "She wanted to fill his mind with resentment against you. We couldn't let that stand." Dolores pressed on, as if they were explaining the results of some necessary surgery. "Marshall Jones is also dead. He died in a car accident, courtesy of resources we arranged. We had to remove threats. Tim is innocent. He deserves stability." I stared, my heart in my throat, my mind reeling from these confessions. They coldly admitted to murder, multiple murders, and had arranged it so Tim remained safely in Dolores's custody. I finally found my voice, trembling with a mixture of horror and disbelief. You're telling me this? Why?" Dolores looked me right in the eye. "Because I'm dying, Martin," she said. "Stage 4 cancer. Your mother has it too." At that, Linda stepped closer, tears threatening, but never falling. "We don't have long," she whispered. "Our biggest concern is Tim." Dolores gently took hold of my wrist. "You're the only one left who can raise him," she said, sincerity in her eyes. I know you hated Kristen, but Tim is innocent. He's a sweet boy. I felt nauseous. You think I can just adopt him like that after everything? Dolores set her jaw. Yes, she said firmly, because we've eliminated the scum that fathered him. Marshall's gone, and your ex-wife is gone too. Linda's voice was subdued, pleading. We want you to take him in. Give him a real home. You're established and stable. That's what Tim needs. Spots danced at the edge of my vision. I realized I was nearly hyperventilating. You both are insane, I whispered. You kill two people. You show me this child who is not biologically mine and expect me to just... I made you the beneficiary in my will, Dolores said, clearing her throat. You'll have everything you need to support Tim. I only ask that you be the father he needs. I stared at the floor, trying to quell the panic radiating through my limbs. My mother moved, placed a hand on my shoulder. I don't expect you to decide now, she murmured. But please, Martin, we did these terrible things to protect him. We know it'll scar our souls forever, but Tim can grow up free from the poison they would have spread. My eyes stung with something close to tears, a swirl of revulsion and pity. You're both murderers, I croaked. Yes, Dolores said. We did what we had to do. The room suffocated me. Tim popped back in from the hallway, wandering toward me. He stared at me with wide, curious eyes. You look scared, he said solemnly. Are you okay? For a moment, everything froze. This little boy, totally innocent, looked at me with genuine concern. Suddenly, I felt dizzy with the weight of it all, the knowledge that if I didn't step up, he'd have no one. Even if my mother and Dolores had done these horrors, they were on the brink of death themselves. Tim's entire future was about to be thrown into chaos, and he had no clue. My voice came out rough. Yeah, buddy, I said quietly. I'm okay. I drove home that night in a swirl of conflicting emotions. Sleep was a stranger. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kristen's face, saw a Florida swamp, saw some monstrous reptile. If Dolores and my mother told me the truth, they had committed unspeakable acts. Yet the next morning, I found myself back at Dolores's house. I couldn't pretend the kid didn't exist. Dolores opened the door as though she had been expecting me. Her eyes gleamed with both sadness and relief. Tim was on the floor, scribbling with crayons. He looked up, recognized me, and gave a small, welcoming grin. Hi, he said simply. I crouched down. Hey, Tim. He held up a piece of paper with a wobbly stick figure. I drew a monster truck, he announced, though it could have been anything. That's really good, I managed, a faint smile finding my lips. Dolores cleared her throat. You can have him, she said, voice stiff with heartbreak. He deserves a parent who'll take care of him. Not me, not Linda. We'll be gone soon. My mother emerged from another room, equally frail. Her eyes were rimmed with red from tears or exhaustion. She reached out to touch my arm. Son, I know it's insane, but Tim is a sweet child. She paused, her gaze darting to him. We did this for him, for you too, to keep your name out of the filth they'd have slung. A wave of grief, anger, confusion battered me. Don't you realize how monstrous it is, what you did? I whispered. Dolores shrugged wearily. We do, but Kristen was beyond reason. She was going to spread lies about you, a man who was never even connected to the child's birth. She was teaching Tim to hate you for abandonment, as if you'd deserted your own child. We had to protect his innocence. Tim looked up, eyes curious. Are you sad? He asked, voice innocent. I found myself forcing a shaky smile. Maybe just a little, I answered. But I'll be all right. And as I looked at his wide, untainted eyes, something in me cracked. I'd never wanted children, not after the heartbreak with Kristen, but I couldn't walk away from him either. It wasn't his fault who his mother or father was, or what had happened to them. Tim, I said gently, wow, how would you like to come live with me? His eyebrows scrunched in childish confusion. Will Grandma Dolores come too? Dolores shot me a sharp glance, but there was sorrow in her eyes. I'm sick, Tim. I can't stay with you for very long. Grandma Linda? He asked. My mother forced a tiny smile. I'm sick too, honey. She took a breath, guiding Tim's eyes to mine. But Martin, he's a good man. He'll take care of you. Tim fiddled with the crayons, absorbing this. Then with childlike resilience, he chirped, Okay, and nodded. I almost laughed at the simplicity. Dolores swallowed convulsively. I'm transferring custody to you, she said quietly, and naming you Tim's legal guardian. He deserves a father. That's final? I asked, my voice hollow. She nodded. We won't be around much longer, Martin. Like we said, both of us have stage 4, she said. Our days are running short. My mother approached him, ruffled his hair, and then looked at me, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, she whispered, for stepping up. I stood, stiff as a board. I'm not doing this for your pride, I said tersely. I'm doing it for him. Linda nodded, heartbreak shining in her gaze, and a hint of regret for the path that had led here. Over the next few weeks, the paperwork went through quietly. Dolores, with whatever resources she'd had, managed to grease the wheels. Soon, Tim was legally under my guardianship, and, as promised, Dolores transferred assets to my name so I wouldn't be financially burdened. I found a new home, a modest house with a small yard, something more suitable for raising a child. And just like that, my life shifted from a solitary routine into fatherhood. My mother and Dolores passed within 2 months of each other. Peacefully, I was told, at least in medical terms. I visited them on their deathbeds, though what I felt was complicated. There was no easy heartbreak or tidy forgiveness. I nodded at them as they whispered final apologies. Linda told me she loved me. Dolores reminded me to take care of our boy. I promised I would, despite the horror of their confessions. They left the world certain they had saved him from a worse fate, being trained to hate me by a vengeful mother. At first, Tim asked simple questions about where his grandmother had gone, or why he couldn't see Kristen. I scrambled for half-truths, telling him softly that his mother had passed away and that his grandmother's had too. That was all a boy his age needed to know. For the next couple of years, we settled into a decent life. I had therapy to manage the mental scars of all that I'd been through. Tim thrived in daycare, then preschool, soaking up knowledge, giggling at cartoons, and embracing me every evening as though I truly was his father. I tried to date a little, but it was never easy. The baggage I carried was enormous. The ghosts of Kristen, of the betrayal, of the horrifying secrets behind her demise, they weighed on me. But I managed to keep that darkness away from Tim. Then life threw one more curveball my way. 4 years into adopting Tim, I met Kelly. We clicked in a way I hadn't experienced since I first fell in love with Kristen. Only better because Kelly was honest. She was a nurse, a Marine veteran like my mother once was. She had her own gentle brand of wit, a directness I found disarming. She and Tim bonded quickly. I'd see them coloring together or engrossed in children's books. The first time Tim called her Mommy Kelly, I froze, uncertain if it was too soon. But Kelly merely smiled, tears in her eyes. 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. She said yes. The wedding was small and simple. Tim was ring bearer, beaming in a little tux. I wondered if my mother and Dolores were watching from beyond the grave, seeing the result of their twisted but well-intentioned plan. A year later, Kelly and I had a daughter. Tim was thrilled to be a big brother. He'd stand guard by her cradle, promising to protect her. His sincerity made my heart ache with both pride and guilt, because I knew how many people had died for him to have this seemingly normal life. I rarely thought about Kristen. My few nightmares about the Florida swamp eventually subsided. As for Marshall, I never uttered his name, nor did I mention him to Tim. What good would it do? One afternoon, after Tim's 8th birthday, I found myself rummaging through an old chest of my mother's belongings in the attic. Kelly was out front mowing the lawn. Tim was playing with the baby. Inside the chest, I found a small diary, worn at the edges. Without meaning to snoop, but with every right to rummage through my late mother's items, I flipped it open. My eyes were greeted by entries from decades ago, presumably just after I was born. Then I found a photo tucked between pages. It showed 2 women in uniform, my mother and Dolores, side by side, serious-faced, near a sign that read George Bush Center for Intelligence. The back was labeled with the date 1999. My mind reeled. My mother had never told me she was CIA. She said she was in the Marines, yes, but not intelligence. And there was a short line scribbled on the next diary page. We made an oath. We keep each other's secrets, protect our children from all threats, no matter the cost. I sank onto an old stool, running a hand over my face, breath shaking. The puzzle pieces I had never quite understood fell into place. My mother's and Dolores's unstoppable bond, their sudden capacity for handling matters with ruthless efficiency, the ease with which they had ended two people's lives, Kristen and Marshall, and concealed it. Yet, even as a chill ran through me, I realized Tim's stability. That bright spark in his eyes was a direct result of their final act. Morally repugnant, yes, but with monstrous determination, they'd stripped away the toxic influences in his life. I felt a faint sense of closure. They had done the unthinkable in the name of love, however twisted it was. I carefully placed the photo back in the diary, slid it all into the chest, and locked it away again. I took a moment to steady my breathing. My daughter's cry drifted upstairs, followed by Tim's gentle hush, Kelly's exasperated laugh, and the sound of our small but cherished family life. I closed my eyes, letting the swirl of guilt and gratitude settle in a single breath. Semper Fi, I whispered, remembering that phrase I once heard them exchange in passing. Always faithful. Indeed, in their own brutal way, they had been faithful to me, to Tim, to their vow that no threat would stand. I made my way down to join my family, determined to move forward with what was left, this improbable happiness. The past was a haunting mosaic of betrayal and violence, yet from the wreckage, Tim and I had built something good, and that, I decided, was where my focus would remain.